I will now call the August meeting of the Sustainable and Economic Vitality Committee to order. As expected, our committee covers topics related to sustainable initiatives and the economic vitality of our great city. Note that no formal votes or decisions about city programs, policies, or budgets will happen here. Our role is to explore various topics with staff and stakeholders and community members and to make recommendations to our council colleagues. We want this process to be transparent, inclusive, and easy for you to be a part of wherever you choose to be. And you can share your thoughts with us by filling out a comment card about any item on a meeting agenda or by reaching out to us directly with any other thoughts, questions, or ideas. The link to the comment cards can be found on our committee webpage at tempe.gov/SEV. And you'll find contact information for committee members and staff there for non-agendized questions as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Chin. The next item on our agenda is item number 2, review and approval of meeting minutes from the May meeting of the Sustainability and Economic Vitality Committee. If there are no objections, I move that we approve the minutes from the May 24th, 2023 meeting as written.
I have no objections, and I second that motion. So the May minutes are unanimously approved. Next up, the next item is 3A, public comments. This committee welcomes public comment. According to Arizona open meeting law, the committee may only discuss matters listed on the agenda. Matters brought up by the public under public comment that are not listed on the agenda cannot be discussed by the committee. A 3-minute limit per person will be in effect, and it looks like I have 3 speakers. In the order received, the first one I have, and it's David Sokolowski, and he's online. David, are you there?
David, you can speak now or unmute yourself.
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, David. Please introduce yourself and the city in which you live.
Okay, my name is David Sokolowski and I live in Tempe. Yardi matrix data shows that green apartments cost on average $560 more per month, and at the same time, Tempe has experienced its highest housing inflation in history. Most of Tempe residents can't afford a $600 green building fee because half our city is already cost burdened by rent. The city of Tempe rejected a proposal to eliminate the rental tax, and Tempe rejected SB 1117 to reform transit-oriented development. Tempe itself has not passed a single reform to fight inflation or solve the housing crisis. The city hasn't adopted reforms like ADUs or parking requirements or non-discrimination. The city has completed 0 out of 1,000 low-income units that the city needs to build each year, and has planned roughly 350 units out of 5,000 units in the next 5 years. At first, Tempe's green building codes will be voluntary, but it will still drive hyper-local inflation. Eventually, it will start to impact what is considered to be fair market rent for the area. This will be a problem because residents can't meet the 2.5 income requirement for an apartment that costs $3,000 a month by 2030. Even if you pass a non-discrimination ordinance, the Section 8 voucher would need to be $6,000 a month for a senior citizen to qualify to live here. Tempe is supposed to be focused on equity, but it's very clear that the city is focused on improving high-income luxury apartments. The city has managed to come up with a green building code, but without the affordability that could come with a density bonus program. By the time a developer meets all of the requirements, the only projects that pencil out are luxury. The council should immediately vote down these green building codes. This is not an appropriate time to increase costs when it's nearly impossible to get affordable housing to pencil out. The city needs to shift its focus to adopting reforms that can fight inflation and stabilize our housing market before the rents cost $3,000 a month. The first priority that makes a community livable should be affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The next person I have is also online, Elizabeth Stewart. Do we have Elizabeth in the queue? Elizabeth, if you are there, if you would introduce yourself and the city of residence.
Elizabeth, you can unmute yourself.
Elizabeth, are you there? Show me-
Elizabeth, you can unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi,
Can you hear?
Elizabeth. Yes, can you introduce yourself and your city of residence, please?
Yes. This is Elizabeth Stewart. I am a 40-year plus resident of Tempe. I would urge this committee to adopt a mandatory international green building code for all new commercial and multifamily buildings. There's no guarantee that there will be any benefit to the occupants of new buildings or to the city of Tempe and its residents if the International Green Building Code is merely voluntary. Adopting a voluntary building code is like adopting a voluntary speed limit. Additionally, I urge this committee to adopt the 2021 edition of the International Energy Construction Code to apply to all new construction, commercial and residential buildings with all possible speed. This will result in lower energy use, cost savings, thermal comfort, and reduced environmental impacts. Benefits include energy cost savings of 10.6% and greenhouse gas emissions reduction of 10.2% over the 2018 edition of the International Energy Construction Code, currently required by Tempe. Tempe can't afford not to adopt the mandatory green building code. The previous speaker spoke about increased cost. The cost not only to the residents of those buildings and the occupants of those buildings will rise dramatically, but it will rise for all of us because buildings that are cheaply constructed have higher energy cost, emit more greenhouse gases, contribute to our heat island, and as we've all just not completely finished surviving the hottest summer ever, looking forward, this is probably not a one-off summer. So we can't afford not to be leaders in this area. Scottsdale has recently adopted a green building code. Our residents deserve nothing less. If all of our construction, the multifamily housing and new commercial construction requires it, it can be done for very much the same kind of cost as the traditional construction. There's a lot of leeway in terms of how compliance is made to the green building code requirements. There's a lot of flexibility in it, and resistance to change is natural, but the affordable housing problem is a separate issue, and that is only going to be solved if there are subsidies and other incentives. It's not going to solve itself in a landlocked city. So I would urge you to move forward with the Green Building Code, but to make it mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Paige Gray.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. My name is Paige Gray, and my city of residence is in Paradise Valley. However, I operate and own a business here in around University Drive, and have since 2011. Three things I'd like to take away from what I'm going to read you that I submitted earlier today is I'd like you to be awareness of the waste and opportunity to save water. An introduction to Filter Clean, our company that we believe we can help, and we want to be a part of the solution. So what I wrote on the website this morning, I'll read verbatim to you if you don't mind. Dear Sustainability and Economic Vitality Council committee team members, were you aware that roughly 50% of Tempe residents' homes have pools where an estimated 25 gallons or more of clean drinking water is wasted during routine pool maintenance? What if there was a local company in your backyard that could help save 2 billion gallons of clean drinking water for our community per annum? Would you be interested? I want to introduce myself. My name is Paige Gray, and my company, Filter Clean, which has already saved an estimated 18 million gallons of clean drinking water since 2011 with operations on 2010 East University Drive. I'm here today to offer our help to this committee, to the city of Tempe, to collaborate and execute on ways for Tempe residential pool owners to save on average of 2,500 gallons of clean drinking water per cleaning. Furthermore, we believe there are significant water saving opportunities with city and commercial pools that utilize pool cartridge filtration, a city, university, apartment complexes, hotels, etc. Filter Clean LLC looks forward to working with this committee and being part of the solution for the residents and business of Tempe to help ease and resolve our critical water situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Kim Gaffney-Loza.
Hi, Kim Gaffney-Loza, Tempe, Arizona. And actually, I participated in the a public meeting that they had on the green building codes, and staff did a great job answering all my questions. I was concerned about how it compared to LEED building, the green building codes that we were being suggested be enacted. And I know that they tried to build those around cost benefit, and I think that's a great idea. One of the things that's in LEED building codes that I don't think we talked about before was the use of local companies and also local materials. And I think that would be one way to not only keep costs down, possibly, but we are in a climate crisis. So anytime that we don't have to transport materials and crews and that type of thing would help cut down on that. I think really what would bring down the cost of apartments is its supply versus demand. And we need to have more supply. And in the long run for a city, what you can do to keep from turning over buildings, the more buildings that we can reconstitute in a green building manner, I think would be beneficial. So I'm for these building codes as long as we see that they are really going to benefit the city as far as the climate and as far as cost, if we can balance that out. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think that's it for our public comments.
Yes, Councilmember Chin.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 4A, current items and updates, and we'll begin with item 4A1, Office of Sustainability and Resilience update. We have coming up, I don't have a walk-up song for you today, Sustainability and Resilience Director Eric Iverson and Deputy Community Development Director Mike Baxley are here with us today, along with a special guest, and I'll have you introduce our special guest to provide an update on our new voluntary International Green Construction Code.
Thank you, Councilmember Chin, Vice Mayor Adams. Thanks for that intro. I'm still getting used to all the, seeing myself on camera everywhere we look. So, I'm Eric Iverson. I'm with City of Tempe Sustainability and Resilience Director. I'm here today to share the update on where we're at with the IgCC, the International Green Construction Code, with Mike Baxley, who's the Deputy Director in Community Development over Building Safety. And then one of our members of our consultant team that's helping to guide this process over the last couple of years, Greg Kinkle, who's with the local local firm that has expertise on this matter, Tempe firm, so that's really great for us, that has, again, been assisting us. So we're going to share this presentation. We'll try to go through it as quickly as possible, knowing that you have questions, and then keeping your time going for the 1 hour. So a couple things on this opening slide. We presented twice in 2022, I think once to the council committee on this topic. We are at the point where we have developed a draft of the chapters that will be included in the Tempe version of the IgCC. And we're in the public process right now. So we're getting feedback, including from this from this committee, council committee, as well as from some of our boards and commissions and public meetings that we had last week. And then we're taking it through formal adoption process. We were proposing to take it through the formal adoption process that we'll get to a little bit more detail later in the presentation, but that would happen in October and November. Let's go to the next slide. So I already kind of went through what we're going to talk about, but we are going to get into detail about what's in the Tempe version of the IgCC. We want to give you some examples of current green building projects and some that are under construction in the city right now that we're learning from. They're helping to inform us of what's in this code for Tempe and really customize it for our city. And then get into some of the next steps for this project and really what we're looking at in the fall to get this adopted. So we're not asking for action today, but we will be asking for action from the council to support the adoption for voluntary implementation of a voluntary code in addition to our building codes that we have in the city. And then we also will be asking at the council November 9th, second hearing of this, we'll be asking for the council to make a commitment to building green for our city buildings. So voluntary for private development, but we're going to be asking the council to build in the future, as we have been doing currently, construct our buildings in Tempe, our city buildings, with the Green Building Code. So many of the council's performance measures are attached to this IgCC effort. You can see those here. I won't go into the details of that, but throughout this presentation, you'll hear some of the changes that we're looking at that will help contribute to the positive movement of these 4 performance measures. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike, who will go through the next set of slides.
Thank you, Eric. So what is the International Green Construction Code, and why do we care so much about it? So one of the things is to keep in mind is the International Green Construction Code is not a new code to how to build. It's just an enhancement of what our base codes are. You will still have to build to the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, Plumbing Code, Mechanical Code. This sets the bar a little bit higher. This is the one that's going to turn around and help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to increase lifespans of the building. It's going to reduce the heat island effect by the use of shade, solar panels on roofs, green roofs, those kinds of things that increase the shade of a building so it reduces that thermal mass of that building so it's not hot all the time. It also will improve our access to EV charging for electric vehicles, which in turn reduces our dependency on fossil fuels. If you take a look at the slide here, it shows that while Tempe has done a really good job from 15 to 20 in reducing our transportation area, which is the blue, you'll see that it dropped, and that thanks to seeing, electric vehicles out there. Where we do not drop is in where our commercial buildings are at. And the adoption of the International Green Building Code would go a long ways to help that, reduce that number, and show that our total greenhouse gas emissions will drop overall. So, code development process. The International Green Building Code is a 10-chapter book. Chapter 1 is administration. We have our own administrative code, so we'll take care of that through there. You'll also know that Chapter 2 is reserved for future use. Chapter 3 is definitions. Chapter 4 is reserved for future use. So really, we're talking about chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Chapter 5 is going to talk about site sustainability. That's stormwater management, how we retain some of that extra water on site, use it for other items, reducing the heat island impact that I talked about earlier. Light pollution, increased bicycle parking, electrical vehicle charging, those kinds of things are addressed in Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is water efficiency. Currently in the building code and our plumbing code, we have a mandate that fixtures are used 1.6 gallons per flush, and this will drop that to 1.28. It'll also talk about energy efficiency, LED lighting, more efficient equipment, actually using energy modeling to find out the best way to operate in a building, indoor environmental quality, dimmable lighting. We always walk into office buildings and we see people with either lights on or they've unscrewed light bulbs and stuff. Well, this will take the opportunity to dim that so we use less power. Materials and resource, we will, by using the International Green Building Code, it will reduce the amount of waste that's going to a landfill from construction. That's part of the requirements of using that code, as they have to manage that waste. Also includes recycling, and then the use of green materials too. And then in the last chapter of the book, it talks about commissioning. We have, in large buildings, we have these big, heavy, or very complex pieces of equipment, mechanical, those kinds of things. And it actually is going to incorporate commissioning of those to make sure that when the building is turned over and it is completed, everything is working at its optimal level, so that way we save more energy as it goes along. And with that, I will turn it back to Eric.
I learned my lesson from council last week to sit down when you're not talking. So a little bit of history and how we got here. We call this slide what has been done so far. Council is familiar. I know Vice Mayor Adams, Councilmember Chin, you're familiar. We have existing green buildings in the city that have been constructed by the city that we're using today. Tempe Transportation Center, where our sustainability office is across the street, and the East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facilities. Those were constructed using the LEED guidelines that Kim had referenced earlier. That's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, very similar to the Green Building Code. So we have experience with this, and we looked at those buildings. We looked at peer cities like Scottsdale was mentioned earlier, and around the planet. What are cities doing? What are regions doing to construct a better environment with sustainable buildings? So that was some of the first research that was done, and we learned from those peer cities both regionally and abroad. We have been, since then, using all that information, we've been working on integrating and customizing all those things that we've learned from our existing buildings as well as from peer city analysis into the chapters that Mike just referenced, and really, again, customizing something that's appropriate for our Sonoran Desert climate as well as for our conditions here in Tempe, where we are landlocked and we have different set of criteria than maybe other cities in the region have. So we, again, have been taking feedback all along the way with that research and with the development of those chapters that Mike went through. And we're at the point now where we are bringing it forward for formal adoption from the council, and that will happen in October and November. We are continuing in the next couple weeks to go to other boards and commissions and get their feedback and see if there's any changes that we would need to implement in the chapters before we send it through for formal council meeting adoption. And then again, as I said in earlier slides, we do want to ask the council at the final hearing for this in November for a commitment from the council to construct our buildings, our municipal buildings in the future, using this green building code. Next slides. We, as development of this IgCC code in Tempe, I mentioned all the research that we've done and looked at our existing buildings in other peer cities. We also have 3 current projects that are in our capital program today in Tempe that are under construction. You can see those projects here: Clark Park, Fire Station number 2, and the TMOC facility over off Rio Salado on 52nd Street, Tempe Municipal Operations Center. And all 3 of those, we're looking at different chapters of the Green Building Code and how they would apply to these projects. And so we're learning from those projects in real time as they're being constructed, designed and constructed, and how they would, again, inform the chapters of our IgCC. So Greg is going to go through what we have learned from those 3 projects that are happening right now.
Thanks, Eric. So we were able to, our company, Quest Energy Group, is located here in Tempe, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. was able to come in and work alongside on these projects at the same time that we're coming in and helping look at the code and look for areas to make this work well for the city and work well for the residents, work well for new projects coming in. So we wanted to, again, go through a couple of the lessons learned and things that we saw on these projects that actually impacted how we changed and developed the code as we brought it forth. So the first project, the TMOC project, one of the things that we identified early in the process was some of the more extensive testing requirements that are inside of the code. So two of those ones were acoustic testing and air testing on the projects. These are things that are highlighted in different chapters that require somebody to come in and actually test the buildings. When we looked at these, they were more costly for the project to actually implement acoustic testing or implement this air testing. And we looked at what is important to the city of Tempe, what is important to these projects. And what we kind of found with some of these more costly items was we were seeing less value to the actual project as it was coming forward, and seeing that there were a lot of other areas of the code that really addressed these without having to spend additional money on testing. So what we looked at was how can we be more flexible? So we actually took these items out of the code to help save costs for projects as they move forward with these and still being able to address them through prescriptive or other areas of the code. During this, we also noticed what Scottsdale or other cities did when they adopted the code, and we noticed that they took out these more costly sections that didn't make as much sense for their cities. So we were able to confidently go forward and say we felt good with pulling these sections out to make it more cost-effective for projects. The next project that we looked at was Clark Park, which is a drastically different project than the TMOC one, where I have smaller buildings, a larger area of site that's dedicated to human use, to the community. And on this project, we specifically came up with the requirements for renewables. Renewables are required as part of the IgCC for every project. And when we looked at renewables, again, it is a more costly endeavor for a project to pursue. But again, we have to look at what is important to the city of Tempe, what is important to green codes and keeping up with them actually being green. And we identified that although it was costly, still value in moving forward. So what we really tried to look for on our projects and in here was how do we add flexibility so that it makes sense for every project and they have more options to make it more cost effective for them specifically. So what we did was came up with more options for projects to have solar ready options, or buying renewable energy certificates, or perhaps doing it on buildings where it made more sense on offsite production. So still incorporating those elements, but trying to find more cost-effective ways that the projects could still incorporate those and make the code more cost-effective for people and still retaining those important goals for Tempe and for the green codes. And then lastly was fire station number 2. And again, a drastically different type of project, small fire station in an urban area, not a large site, very tight, trying to work with existing conditions. On this project, we looked at the site vehicle provisions. So fire stations have very unique parking requirements, and they don't have the same ones that you'd see with large commercial projects. And we looked in here at what would be required for EV charging. So the green code requires that you have electric vehicle charging, you have carpool parking reserved. And we looked at these and said, is this really important? And after looking at what's important to City of Tempe and what's important to the codes, it still is, even though it can be costly, an important part of those green requirements and important to the direction that the City of Tempe is moving. So again, we looked at how could we address these and change these so that they would be incorporated, but still offer flexibility and still find ways that they could do it cost effectively to make it a successful code. So what we did was looked at different opportunities where we could say, maybe we could have areas that are EV ready, maybe we could have areas that are EV capable, or giving opportunities to actually put EV parking in, but giving more flexibility to the projects as they come in so that they can do these successfully for unique situations, but still being able to apply them to a lot of different buildings on here. But over all 3 buildings, really having success to be able to learn from those projects, adapt from those, look at other cities, adapt for those, and come up with a code that really makes sense for projects for the city of Tempe that can be successful going forward for the city. With that, I will turn it back over to Eric.
I think this is the last time I get up and down. So with that, get my steps in. Yeah. I've mentioned this in previous slides, but we wanted to specifically call out for the public and for the council to see that indeed we are asking for the council to make a commitment or consider a commitment to build our future buildings as we are currently utilizing this green building code. We do want to mention that we are, as Greg and Mike have both mentioned, building in flexibility. We're learning as we're doing this. We've learned a lot from the buildings that we have constructed since 2008, like the Transportation Center. So we want to ask the council for that commitment, but we also recognize that there may be cost constraints at times and changes to the code that may need to happen, or changes to capital projects that may need to happen too. But we think it's a good first step to take to commit to trying to build green and to move forward with that in mind. And then next steps. And again, I've mentioned this. We are in a public process right now, going to some of the boards and commissions, as well as our public meetings last week, and those are all posted on our website. Going to Vice Mayor Adams and Arlene Chin, your council committee today, and then starting the formal adoption process in October, November timeframe. So I think October 12th would be the first hearing for the code change, and then November 9th would be the second hearing and formal adoption of the code at those two regular council meetings. So that's tentatively the schedule, and that's what we've been advertising. There's a couple other processes that have to happen before that, this public process being one of them. Mike and his team will be taking this through a technical advisory group to make sure that the professionals that deal with building construction that we're advancing something that's feasible and permitted. So that will happen too. But by the end of that November 9th council meeting, we would hope that we would have an adoption of the code and then be looking at implementation as early as the end of this calendar year. Concurrent with the process that we're going through right now, there is a position that was approved by the council last year to hire what's called a Green Codes Plan Reviewer that will be housed in community development and assist people with engagement and use of the IgCC when they want to use it. So we'll have a staff person on board to help guide people in the community that want to build with that code. And with that, we open up for questions, and we certainly can come back for more presentations, but look forward to hearing your feedback, and our team here can answer questions that you may have. The three of us should be able to do that. Thank you.
You were calling them up.
Yeah.
Three of them.
Hey
Not
guys,
one
help
of
me out
them.
here.
Right. Thank you, Eric. Vice Mayor Adams, do you have any questions or comments regarding the presentation?
I sure do. The first one is Scottsdale's Green Building Code. Is it mandatory or voluntary?
Great question. So it was voluntary. Greg knows all the answers here. It was voluntary for many years, and they just went through a process to make commercial elements of it mandatory. And that was just, I'll let Greg speak, but that was just a couple months ago. So we're watching them to see what kind of community response they get, but Greg can elaborate.
So Scottsdale adopted all their new codes in January, and this one actually went into effect this summer for City of Scottsdale, so it is mandatory for all commercial buildings and multifamily. It does not impact the residential buildings in Scottsdale.
So you said that it's been voluntary for years. What percentage of people took advantage of that and did do it voluntarily?
I'd say we probably had, because we worked on quite a few of the projects that did it voluntarily, and we probably had 5, I would say not less than 5, but maybe not more than 10 a year that would be doing the IgCC code. A lot of times it was used as a bargaining tool with the city, where if there was more density requested or different zoning stipulations, they would use the IgCC as a bargaining tool with the developers. And so a lot of the projects that utilized it were doing it voluntarily, but with the city as a negotiation.
Okay, thank you. And how's the development community reacting to this? Just out of curiosity, have you talked to?
What, City of Scottsdale or City of Tempe?
It's City of Tempe.
City of Tempe.
Well, you could actually both.
Yeah. Go ahead on Scottsdale.
So Scottsdale, being
roll.
mandatory is a big step, and so they had a long process of getting that through and working with the community, and there was lots of meetings, but so far it has been successful. And developers were used to doing a lot of different types of green buildings, so putting it into the code, having it for all buildings was a big step, but they've been managing it well. For City of Tempe, I guess I'll let Eric respond to how we've seen people responding on that.
I'll just say that in the public process, we have had a lot of the comments you heard today were similar to the comments that we've received through the public process, but we have not had significant pushback from the developer community through that process. Mike is the closest attached to it, so may have some additional feedback.
I can tell you I haven't had any people from the developer community reach out and have any conversations about it.
And I will add that we've been doing this in Tempe, and for one, this is voluntary, but we have been doing this in Tempe. We have, as you know, we have some developments in Tempe where they have wanted to do certain things like water harvesting or plants incorporated into the sides of the building that are part of green building elements, and they have voluntarily, sought out how to do that. So we do think there's already interest from the development community.
Okay, thank you. And then what about local products like Kim brought up, using local products?
I'll answer that one.
Yep.
So there is in the materials section of the code, it asks that projects utilize 2 different types of materials, and they give 5 categories you could choose from. So you could focus on having regional materials, recycled materials. I think they have biodegradable materials. But what they focus on is they say, whatever makes the most sense for your project, choose 2 of these categories to focus in. So regional could be that. And again, if you had a project with a lot of masonry, that might be a great option. If you have a wood project where you don't have a lot of regional, you may want to focus on recyclables or biodegradable materials. So it gives you options in there, but it definitely does address regional materials.
I like it. This is a great presentation. I'm very excited about the Green Code and getting that on the books in Tempe. So I really appreciate all of you coming together and explaining all this to both Councilmember Chin and myself, and also to our community. So thanks, and good game plan as far as bringing it in October, November. I like it. So keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do. I have a few comments and questions. First, let me preface my questions and comments with my appreciation for using and emphasizing the term flexibility. And the general philosophy of flexibility, I think we all try to do it in the city, right? As we learn more, we do better and do more. So I really appreciate that. And I think that for anyone listening, that applies to many things in the city. As we grow and learn more, we try to improve together. So that was very nice. Thank you for including that. Second, EV. You hear the council ask that question when we have plans come up before us. How many EV charging stations? That sooner rather than later is important, because we need to be asking the right questions. And I know that EV charging stations are evolving as we speak, right? So accelerating that to at least give us the information so that we are supporting any recommendations you have. But I think that's critical now. And because there are projects coming before us that talk about EV. And do I ask for a 2 or a 3? What are we asking for? Right? But that technology, as I said, is changing as we speak, right? A lot of the car manufacturers, the domestic large ones, are converting and partnering so that more cars can use. What do we want? I guess that's fill in the blank. Help us. Help in this regard. In other presentations, I think it may be helpful to really key in on the differences between LEED and IgCC. As a layperson, I don't know the difference. So I hear you saying it's similar, okay, but where is it different? And why are we, where's the, right, the reason behind that to help people understand? Do you want to answer that now? Take a crack at it now?
Sure. One of the big differences is the developer doesn't have to pay for the LEED cert, or doesn't have to pay for IgCC, where they have to pay for the LEED certification. That's one of the big differences. They require them to pay them.
So LEED is a certification they have to seek out to get the stamp of approval, whereas IgCC is just the building code.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was great. That was a great explanation. Thank you. So also, the costs, when you mentioned costs and why you eliminated some items from the code in reviewing, I think it's important to note, are they upfront costs or is it versus the long-term ROI on having a better durable building? And maybe adding details about that and what that means. Because a couple of the things you mentioned, right? You said acoustics and air, we didn't see that as a priority, so we left that out. But EV charging stations would add upfront costs maybe, but it would pay off also in the long term. So I think maybe differentiating, because I think that's important. We're talking about buildings that we want to be sustainable in all senses and also usable for reuse should something change. Also, the last thing, you said that there would be many opportunities to hear more about the proposal between now and November. And I'm emphasizing for a reason. So you can find the information about the other occasions on the SEV website. So tempe.gov, SEV, under this committee, we'll have dates and times, and also sustainability and resilience site.
Yeah, we'll share dates, like really it's upcoming boards and commissions. Can you speak? Oh, sorry. We will share dates with staff so they can get it on your council committee page, and then certainly those will be added if they're not already. I need to verify on our own sustainability link on the www.tempe.gov site.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions I had. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will now flow on to item 4A2, Tempe's Water Utilities Division update. See, I said flow. I didn't say move. Thank you. I have to point that out to you all. Interim Water Services Manager Tina Sleeper will present on this item, and I think she is accompanied by Craig Caggiano.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just up here to introduce Tina, and then I'm going to let her take it away. And in the interest of time, good afternoon. I'm Craig Caggiano. Let me give it over to Tina.
Thank you, Craig. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Adams. Good afternoon, Councilmember Chin. Very excited to be here. Water resources, drought, Colorado River shortage, it's in the news and it's on our minds. So the purpose of this presentation is to address Tempe's water security and our drought preparedness and resiliency efforts. Oh, thank you. Tempe's water security remains intact despite continued shortage on the Colorado River and more than 2 decades of drought in the Southwest. Tempe has earned a designation of assured water supply from the Arizona Department of Water Resources by maintaining a diverse water resources portfolio, by investing in infrastructure and reducing reliance on groundwater, empowering effective water usage through a 30-year water conservation program. We'll explore each of these areas in brief. Tempe's designation of assured water supply is significant. The Assured Water Supply Program is a state regulation overseen by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, also known as ADWR. When a municipal water provider demonstrates demonstrates an assured water supply sufficient to meet the water demands of an entire service area, ADWR issues that designation of assured water supply. So Tempe's designation demonstrates legal and continuous access to sufficient water supplies to support current and future water demands of the city of Tempe and town of Guadalupe, including projected growth and increased density in some areas for at least 100 years. The projections for future water demand are developed based on data regarding projections for growth, including information identified in Tempe's latest general plan. Designated providers like Tempe are required to demonstrate sufficient water supplies to meet demand at least once every 15 years. And our most recent designation was provided in 2010. We are in the midst of submitting for our 2025 designation. The designation is very important. It demonstrates that Tempe has engaged in strategic planning and sufficient water resources that allows us to grow wisely. At the heart of Tempe's resiliency to drought and shortage is maintaining a diverse water resources portfolio. The illustrated map on the screen summarizes Tempe's water sources, which include waters from the Salton Verde River, delivered by the Salt River Project, also known as SRP, imported water from the Colorado River, delivered by the Central Arizona Project, also known as CAP, and groundwater. Note the reservoirs associated with each of these: 4 reservoirs on the Salt, 2 on the Verde system. The reservoirs supporting the Colorado River are not on here, but Lake Pleasant is shown as it serves important storage functions for the CAP, which brings Colorado River water to central and southern Arizona. On the screen, you'll see a pie chart that shows a breakdown of Tempe's water supply by source in a typical year. As the chart indicates, Tempe's water sources primarily consist of water from SRP. Groundwater typically makes up 7% of Tempe's water sources, while the CAP provides 6% of Tempe's sources. The SRP system is well managed and carefully allocated. The current reservoir levels, as shown on the screen, indicate 90% full, having captured much of the recent robust winter snowmelt and runoff. Tempe has a history of wise water investment and planning for growth that has helped create and maintain this diverse portfolio. These investments began in the late 1800s when landowners began beneficially utilizing waters from the Salton Verde rivers, and later when landowners put up their land as collateral to support the building of SRP's dams. Under Arizona law, these early investments provide most of Tempe with rights to utilize SRP member water. The areas that are shaded in blue on the screen indicate land areas in Tempe that retain rights to utilize SRP member water. Most recently, Tempe's investment in surface water treatment plants in the 1960s and again in the 1980s, they enabled us to utilize Tempe's member water, SRP member water, and other renewable surface water sources as primary sources of water, and helped reduce our reliance on groundwater so that the latter can be utilized as a reserve for the future. Surface water requires treatment to ensure that drinking water complies with the Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act for safe consumption. It's important to note that standards for water quality have grown more stringent over the years and are likely to continue doing so. Our investments over the years in building, expanding, maintaining, and increasing treatment capacities at these surface water treatment plants help ensure that we maintain that diverse water resources portfolio, as use of surface water to meet essential needs depends upon achieving that proper water quality. Sustainable and resilient water resources depend upon wise investment in infrastructure such as surface water treatment plants. Tempe continues to invest millions in water resources and infrastructure, with an estimated $700 million to be spent over the next 5 years on projects such as the rehabilitation of the Kyrene Water Reclamation Facility to enable local reuse of reclaimed water for industrial processes and to recharge into the ground. For every gallon of water stored, Tempe earns a credit that can be used in the future as a resource. To ensure that Tempe can increase the amount of water that we can store in the ground, Tempe is also adding new aquifer recharge capacity. We're investing in new groundwater recovery wells and upgrading surface water treatment processes, as mentioned. Finally, investments also include the development of an integrated water utilities master plan, which will incorporate elements from the Tempe 2050 general plan. Several of these investments will help us prepare for a future with less Colorado River water by increasing access to alternative water supplies. Although the CAP water supplies just 6% of the city's water portfolio in a typical year, it is currently a primary source for roughly 20% of Tempe's water service area. These geographic areas do not have rights to the SRP member supplies to support their demands. Tempe's allocation of Colorado River water delivered by the CAP is an important source of supply. The Colorado River, as you have heard, over-allocated, its production being affected by drought and climate change. In 2021, the Bureau of Reclamation declared shortage on the Colorado for the first time, and we have been in a state of shortage ever since. The impacts of shortage stages to the CAP and to Tempe is determined utilizing a complex process. However, to put it in perspective, in a Tier 2A shortage, which was the operational shortage in place this year, Tempe experienced a reduction of less than 1%, approximately 5 acre-feet out of 5,000 acre-feet. And as a reminder, an acre-feet of water is the amount of water it takes to fill an acre of land to a depth of 1 foot. Next year, Tempe does not anticipate any impacts from the predicted Tier 1 shortage stage. It is likely that the region will face a future with less available CAP water. Therefore, although the impacts on Tempe are minimal right now, we have been preparing for more drastic cuts in the future. Tempe continues to prepare for the future by taking actions to increase drought preparedness and resiliency. One of those actions was to implement the Drought Stage 0, also called WATCH, of our drought preparedness plan. The stage recognizes that conditions on the Colorado River have deteriorated over the years. This stage includes monitoring drought conditions, investing in local use of reclaimed water, increasing our customers' understanding of water challenges, and expanding our robust water conservation efforts. Water resources and infrastructure investments are important components of drought preparedness. We also need to manage demand for water. Tempe has had a water conservation program for over 30 years. This program provides educational and financial resources to help our customers understand their water usage and make changes to increase efficiency and reduce waste. The infographic you see on the screen reflects a portion of the successes the program experienced in 2022. As you can see, we offer rebates and grants to help our customers make permanent improvements related to water usage on their properties. Tempe has seen great success in water conservation, with residential demands falling even as residential populations have increased about 20%. As you can see, water consumption in this version of the chart, it's the blue line, has become decoupled from population. These trends in efficiency apply to all potable water consumption across all customer categories, with an approximate 20% decrease in potable water demand since the year 2000. Tempe encourages customers to continue this long tradition of using water wisely by participating in the robust water conservation program. The successes in water conservation serve as a regional model of effective water usage in preparation for a future with less Colorado River water. We ask all customers to continue practicing a conservation mindset by taking actions that reduce water waste and lead to long-term improvements in water usage. Some of those ideas are on the screen. Preparing for a future with prolonged drought, climate change uncertainties, and less Colorado River water requires partnerships and constant communications. One such partnership that is key to the future is between Tempe Water Utilities and the city's economic development team. Together, we can ensure that Tempe's growth aligns with available supplies, which allows Tempe to grow sustainably while supporting the existing water needs of the community. Thank you for your time. We'll take questions.
Thank you so much for that thorough presentation. It's never dry. Come on, have some water. Vice Mayor Adams, any comments, questions?
This presentation was very informative, and I really appreciate it. And just keep up the good work. I'm glad you pointed out that even though we're developing, we still have enough water, because that comes up a lot. The community says, well, how can we keep like building, tall buildings and things like that with our water shortage? So you did a great job explaining that. So thank you so much. Great presentation. I almost always have questions, but you covered it all, Tina. And Tina is also really good at the Water Smart program and helped us save money and save water. So I really appreciate that. And I brought your name up the other night we need to have somebody like you to go out to the community for gardens. So I said your name last Thursday night. So I didn't know if you knew that, but I really appreciate everything you do, and the water department, keep up the great work and great presentation. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I do have a couple of comments, questions. The first one is, there's a quote, and Craig and Tara taught me this, and suddenly I blanked on it, but you had the slide about water usage. Is it over the last 20 years, the population has increased by 17%? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so-
But the demand?
We're trying to make it a little bit easier to remember, but since the year 2000, population has increased by 20%, but water consumption has fallen by about the same amount.
That was surprising for me, and because I think it's because we all have a conservation mindset, not just in your leadership and how the city approaches our planning and growth, but I think in Arizona, we all know we live in a desert, right? So we all have that conservation mindset, and I think that's important. And that Tempe is in a good position. And this is what I wrote, what I heard, since the 1800s, Tempe's been mindful about our growth and have planned accordingly with our resources. And we continue to do that today. None of our growth and planning it's informed, and we use data, and we take into account our resources and the demand of our residents and stakeholders. So, important to point out. Rebates and grants, as you said, some residents have asked me, right? What do we do? What's going on? Because they're reading the paper. On the tempe.gov website, I think it's under rebates.
Yes. Tempe.gov/conservation rebate section lists all of the rebates available to every customer class.
Great. That's for anyone who wants to contribute to the cause, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Great presentation. Thank you, Craig, for all of your input during the presentation. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we will move ahead to item 4B, new items for consideration. I believe we have one new item, 4B1, presentation proposals for future council committee meetings. Vice Mayor Adams, do you have any updates you'd like to see at the next SEV committee meeting?
No, I do not.
Well, that was easy. I do not either. That's the last of our scheduled discussions today. So we'll move on to item 4C, announcements. I have none.
I have no announcements today.
Look at that. We're flowing right along. Our next committee meeting will be on Monday, September 18th, 2023. I'd like to thank you all for being here today, both virtually and in person. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.